Hi, everyone. Eilena Armstrong, VP of Editorial for SC Magazine here, welcoming you to another SIEM eSymposium session, this one sponsored by EIQ Networks, during which we'll hear some different perspectives on security information and event management. Most organizational leaders definitely see the merits in deploying SIEM solutions to help them thwart seemingly more aggressive cyber attackers after critical data. However, despite the faith and this kind of faith, and certainly the often costly investments that these guys make in SIEM technologies, IT security pros and their bosses frequently voice some dissatisfaction, noting that deployments typically fall short in making a palpable difference in helping them to repel or at least quickly remediate cyber attacks. Still, say many SIEM can help if deployed and leveraged effectively by managers who bear in mind some crucial steps along the way to really derive the technology's true value. So here in just a moment, Kevin Landt, product manager with EIQ Networks, who has well over a decade of experience through various engineering, marketing, and product management roles, will discuss some key considerations that all of you can bear in mind when looking to leverage SIEM solutions more effectively to protect your data assets. First, though, I just really want to remind you to send in your questions as you have them, and we'll definitely take some time at the end for a brief Q&A. And obviously, if we miss some, I'll certainly work with Kevin to make sure that those get answered by email. So with that, I would like to hand things over to Kevin Landt. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks, and I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak today. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us on our webinar that we're calling Don't Waste Your Money on SIEM. My name is Kevin Landt. I'm a product manager at EIQ Networks. And the title of our webcast really, it is meant to be a bit tongue-in-cheek, but people do end up wasting a lot of time and money on SIEM projects. So today I'm going to talk about 4 ways to waste your money on SIEM. Once we cover those, we'll try to figure out if you need a SIEM or not. And if you do, I have 3 things for you to consider before you go ahead and try to deploy it. And last, I'll talk a little bit about EIQ Networks and what we're doing to try to help with SIEM and security operations. So what do I mean when I say people waste money on SIEM? Well, I'm talking about when the value you get from it is far less than what you spent on it. And this tends to happen when the value is much lower than what was promised, or when the cost is much higher than you expected. And you don't have to take my word for it. Lots of surveys come out every year that show some dissatisfaction with SIEM. Here's one recent one. It said 75% of users think SIEM reports contain too much noise. 61% of those people thought that SIEM reports are incomplete. And 55% found SIEM reports too hard to understand. Here's another survey that was taken recently. It found that 85% of the people that were collecting their logs were doing it to detect and track suspicious behavior. But unfortunately, 46% of those people stated that doing that key objective, detecting blended advanced threats, was their most difficult outcome to achieve. So these are clearly people that wanted to get certain value out of SIEM, and they're not getting what they were promised. And then last, we have a survey that EIQ Networks does every year. This one was from a recent past survey. It found 25% of the people that we surveyed have invested more than a month in professional services since they deployed their current SIEM product. We also found 52%, over half of them, require 2 or more full-time employees to manage the current SIEM deployment. So maybe these were additional expenses that were budgeted for, but in a lot of cases, these come as a surprise cost. So now I'll talk about some of the ways that people go and waste money on SIEM. And the first one I want to talk about is jumping into a SIEM purchase before you've done the security basics. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this list of critical security controls. It was developed by the SANS Institute in coordination with U.S. and international agencies, as well as some private sector security experts. And the controls that are listed here are in priority order in terms of getting the biggest bang for your buck security-wise. Notice that monitoring and analyzing log data is actually number 14 on the list. So it's an important security control. It is required by many compliance regulations. However, before you run out and invest in SIEM, have you done these basics? If you don't have a good handle on these first 4 or 5 controls, it's kind of like leaving your car unlocked in a bad neighborhood with your laptop sitting right out there. If you don't implement these security controls before or maybe during your SIEM deployment, you're really leaving too many doors open, and you're going to get a flood of noise. Your SIEM is just going to be overwhelmed with security events day and night. And that flood of noise is what prevents people from getting good value out of their SIEM and being proactive about their security. The second way to waste money on SIEM is to launch into a deployment without a clear plan in place. Your plan should address these key questions. What security or compliance issue are you really trying to address? What security products are currently in place? How will adding a SIEM transform your current measures? And how will you respond when there is an alert? And these seem obvious, but a lot of people rush into it because someone told them they needed a SIEM and they're going to go get one, and they didn't think of where it actually fits. So keep in mind that a SIEM is really just a tool, and it needs to be put to work correctly in order to achieve the results you want. Don't start your project without a well-thought-out blueprint. The next downfall of SIEM deployments occurs when you fail to tune the system. Unfortunately, what you see in a lot of marketing is vendor A has a lot of alerts. They're built right into the product out of the box. Vendor B has even more alerts. That's even better. But in the end, none of these are actually tuned for your environment. To do that, you really need human intelligence and a lot of familiarity with your own unique network. So expect to waste a lot of money on SIEM if you don't have the ability to write correlation rules that fit your specific needs, tune the thresholds of the alerts to filter the noise, refine the rules based on your own experience with the alerts. And here we'll find that a good security operation should learn from past incidents and the false alarms and make adjustments as they go. And finally, you need to adapt the correlation rules as your own conditions change. And none of these things will come out of the box with your SIEM. And finally, many organizations invest in SIEM without investing in the people to get value out of it. Each and every alert should trigger a human response, and I want to emphasize that. Every alert should trigger a response. If not, it means that you didn't put together a response plan ahead of time. Or it means that you're just ignoring alerts because you failed the previous slide and you didn't tune the system. The process itself takes some dedicated staff because for each incident, you're going to have to do triage, analysis, you're going to have to do a response according to your plan, and then you should really be doing post-incident review to learn from it. And your staff will often need to perform advanced forensic analysis to get to the root cause. And that's a skill people just don't always invest in when they go and buy a SIEM. The roadblocks here, they usually boil down to these 2 points. Your staff just doesn't have enough time, and that's often because, at least in the companies we work with, people end up being part-time security analysts, and they still have their full-time IT operations job. And we also see that people don't always have the security expertise to go and do that advanced analysis. So with these 4 challenges in mind, it's time to ask if you need a SIEM. Another way I like to frame the question is, do you need a security operations center? And the reason I like that question a little better is because it emphasizes that SIEM is a tool which is leveraged by security analysts. It also helps position the SIEM project in the context of your overall security goals. the answer to the question might be no. All I really need to do is collect the logs, and I want to show them to my auditor once a year, and that's all I need. If that's the case, then you might get away with just a simple log management tool. On the other hand, you probably do need a Security Operations Center or a SOC if you're concerned about threat detection, incident response, complying with more detailed regulations like PCI, and reducing your overall business risk. If you do need a SIEM, then I do have a few things for you to consider. The first big consideration is whether you should build your own SOC or outsource it to a service provider. It's an important decision, and there's no right answer here, but a few things to think about are, do you have the expertise in-house? We just talked a lot about how important the humans are to the success of your SIEM project. So are you going to need more training? Do you need to hire 3 shifts of people so that you can have a 24/7 coverage? And what will all that cost in comparison to a managed SIEM approach? Another thing to consider here when deciding to build or outsource is whether you have all the right processes in place. Are you doing all the security basics on an ongoing basis, or is that something you should really bring somebody in to help you with? And last, did you budget for running a SOC on an ongoing basis, or did you only budget for the upfront SIEM purchase? That's something that you really need to get your senior management on board with. They need to understand that you're going to be running a SOC, not just buying a SIEM, and they need to be fully engaged and on board. One rule of thumb I've seen is that to run an around-the-clock SOC function, you need a minimum of 7 full-time staff members. Another consideration, whether you're building a SOC or you're choosing a service provider, is how to evaluate the skills of the people you need. So some of the technical skills involve understanding the basics of networking, of operating systems, also being familiar with security devices like firewalls and IDS, as well as those security controls we talked about that really need to be implemented along with those things. And of course, the ability to perform a forensic evaluation and investigation. The things that I called soft skills here would include things like the ability to handle a large amount of data coming at you, make decisions based on that data, and be able to communicate well with others. Also, they should really be up to date on their adversaries and the current threat landscape. A lot of people say they should think like a hacker. And then, of course, you should probably understand what their certifications are and what your expectations are in that area. The list could include things like CISSP, Certified Ethical Hacker, and then, of course, there's some vendor-specific certifications to think about. You should be aware that you're not the only one trying to attract this talent. Demand for these skills is up dramatically. Here's some numbers from one recruiting site that shows the number of job postings in the security area year over year has increased dramatically. And the surveys also show that most organizations report difficulty in recruiting and hiring security specialists. And then the last consideration that I wanted to mention is around budgeting for the SOC. First, you have your upfront cost, and this one seems pretty obvious, but you do have to buy the SIEM software and the hardware to run it. But also the upfront cost could include professional services to deploy the SIEM, could include recruiting and hiring staff, which does represent an upfront cost. And then don't forget product training. So you might end up having to fly your team across the country for a week-long vendor training to learn how to use the SIEM. One way you could reduce upfront costs is to consider a subscription-based SIEM product or a SaaS model. The second important budget category here is the operational expense. I broke this into 2 categories. So there's the staff, which we've already talked about in detail here, and technology. And so it's important to keep in mind that the technology cost doesn't end after the purchase either. You're going to have things like maintenance, maintaining the hardware it's running on, and a lot of times there's additional professional services if you add devices later. And one thing to do is to consider a managed service to kind of turn all of these, both the upfront costs and the ongoing costs, into a more stable, predictable annual cost. So those are the three things that we've seen really help if you can take into consideration before you start your SIM project instead of waiting until afterwards. And hopefully you don't end up being one of the people that waste money on SIM. A little bit about EIQ. Our goal is to provide the tools and services that you need to implement a SOC. As you probably noticed, we really emphasize the importance of people and process and technology all working together to strengthen your security. We offer two ways to do that. We have SecureView, which is our SIM platform for those who want to build their own SOC. It has been reviewed a number of times by SC Magazine, scores consistently well, so we recommend checking out the reviews. And we also offer SOCView service for those who want to supplement their own staff with a managed service. One of the key differences with both SecureView and SOCView is that we give you the ability to not just do SIM events in correlation, but to monitor and report on critical security controls as well. And those are the basics of security that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. With our platform, you have the ability to automate the assessment of 9 of the controls so that they're continuously being measured. The dashboard shows pass-fail results in a traffic light style, so you can quickly assess how many of your network nodes are in compliance with the control. And then you can drill down on different sets of nodes or individual nodes and get remediation guidance on how to get them in compliance with the security control. And the nice thing is that these controls map very well to a lot of the compliance regulations. Because they are sort of the common sense security basics, they form the backbone of a lot of these other compliance frameworks like HIPAA and PCI and NIST. If you decide against building your own SOC, EIQ does have a managed SIM service called SOCView, and that includes 24/7 security monitoring by EIQ security analysts. It does include the security controls assessment to make sure you're being proactive about closing security vulnerabilities and ready to really get value out of SIM. It includes notification of any security events that we detect, and with that we give guidance for responding to the incident. It offers complete log management solution to meet your audit log requirements, and then that should be a given for any SIM solution. We automate the reporting for a range of those compliance frameworks, and we provide access to trained security analysts whenever you need them. So we really want the EIQ SOC team to be an extension of your own resources. We know how hard it is to get additional people for your team, so we want to free the people you have to go do high-value work while we run your SIM for you. So a SOCView from EIQ, you can implement a SOC at a fraction of the cost of doing it yourself. And that's all I have for today. I'd like to thank SC Magazine for hosting us at today's event. I'd like to thank all of you for attending. I think we are going to take some questions now, but if we don't get to it, please visit our booth. Thank you.
Very good. And thank you so much, Kevin. You really did a fine job calling out some of the issues that often crop up around SIM deployments so that our audience can take some steps to try to avoid some of these potential impediments. We do have some questions. First up, and you've talked quite a bit about SIEM deployments really needing, folks have to take into account the total cost of ownership and making sure they have the right number of employees, et cetera. Can you talk more about cases where you only need log management? Can you give some examples there, maybe case studies?
Sure. I guess the first thing is just to define what we mean by log management versus SIEM, because I think they get conflated a lot today. My definition of log management is that you're collecting the logs, organizing them and storing them, and that's all you're doing, and that's log management. And then SIEM is where you're actually getting into real-time analysis. And there probably is some people that only need log management. It's certainly a lot less expensive than SIEM and easier to implement. And that would be to meet a compliance requirement that maybe says you need to store them and you need to show us that you're storing them. And maybe you're only going to use them to investigate after something bad happens. You're not going to look at them on an ongoing basis. But if you need to investigate something, they're there, you can get to them and you can find them. So I think there is still some area where that applies, but I do think that that's less and less today. I think most people today really do need the real-time analysis, and some of the more stringent compliance regulations, PCI, for example, says not only do you have to gather the logs, but you actually have to review them daily. And I don't see how that would be feasible with just log management. You would really need to run those logs through a correlation engine to review them.
And hearkening back to the list of security controls that you mentioned during your talk, one of our audience members would like to be reminded, where can he get that list of security controls?
Sure. So those controls were actually published by SANS, so you can find them at sans.org. And I believe management of those controls has recently passed to the Center for Internet Security. The interesting thing is you can find some case studies out there of organizations that have implemented the controls and seen some pretty dramatic results, reduction in malware. I think the state of Colorado is one, and the U.S. State Department. So to look for those case studies. And I also mentioned that the controls map well the compliance policies, and you can find some information about that on the EIQ website.
And I mean, I would imagine in your experience talking to some potential customers or even some security pros at industry events, what's the frequency that you see IT security leaders or their companies taking a gander at this list of security controls and trying to map their risk management plans and technology buys and all that other jazz to such a comprehensive list? Do you see it frequently?
It's definitely becoming more common. I think a lot of the things are common sense, but they weren't really spelled out in a framework that you could measure, and a lot of effort across the industry has been going on to do that, because it's a lot of people are coming to realize that you can't just chase after breaches. You have to be more proactive and put things in place ahead of time. So it's definitely gaining a lot of traction.
Good. So does EIQ manage the devices or just monitor them? Excuse me. One of our audience members would like to know.
Sure, that's a good question. And different service providers handle it in different ways. At EIQ, we don't touch your core infrastructure. We don't manage your firewalls or your servers or anything like that. And the reason why is we think you know it best. You probably have some change control processes in place that we don't want to mess with, and we would rather just give guidance on how you should secure those things. What we do manage is the SIEM platform itself, and in our experience, managing the SIEM platform is really where we can add the most value, because that's the piece of the technology that people aren't as familiar with. They don't have time to learn, and they don't have time to tune it.
And so very quickly then, again, just harkening back to some of the ways that EIQ offers help, is your product cloud-based then? That's another, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a common question we get. We actually have two components to the service. So one is a web portal, and the web portal is where you log in, you've got your security dashboard, you can see all of your incidents that are open or in progress that you're addressing that we've detected, and that's where you get your reports as well. And because it's subscription-based and it's web-based, some would call it a SaaS. But in terms of being based in the cloud, the core infrastructure of it is our SecureView SIEM platform, and we can deploy that either on your premises or on a cloud server. So we leave it up to our customers for where it makes sense, because we've found a lot of people really aren't ready to move all their logs to the cloud, so we offer both options.
Very good. Well, that about does it for this session. If we missed any questions, as I noted at the start, we'll definitely follow up with you by email. Thanks again to Kevin Landt, Product Manager with EIQ Networks, for really delving into some of the issues with SIEM technologies and how offering some ways for you to avoid these. If any of you would like to revisit any points Kevin made today, you'll be able to access this and the many other sessions comprising our eSymposium on demand very shortly. But in the meantime, we still have more helpful talks in store, so please do enjoy the rest of today's event on SIEM. You can also visit the EIQ Networks booth right now. So thank you all for clicking in, and until next time, please be well.